I hit the streets pretty early in life, around 15 years old. Along with that, came a lot of issues, substance abuse, violence. In my younger years and even out on the streets, there was some sexual abuse, and those were my traumas. All those traumas and the alcohol abuse and the drug abuse is what led me to the Lighthouse Mission.
Me and my dad were real close, and I took care of both my mom and him until they died. They both died in my arms. I was sitting on the bed and we lifted him up, and he was right here when he died, on my chest. I could just feel his spirit just go.
When we experience trauma as humans, our brain creates all these natural defense mechanisms to cope with that. Trauma is a part of everybody's story that we see here. Everybody has their own unique set of trauma and just risk factors that have gotten them to where they're at today. And so when they come to us, we're trying to teach them healthy ways to cope with things that happen in life rather than destructive patterns that they've relied on in the past.
A lot of our staff are trained in trauma-informed care, nonviolent crisis interventions, de-escalations, things like that. Because a lot of times when someone comes through our door, they're having either the worst moment, the worst week, or the worst month of their life, and oftentimes are trying to negotiate some kind of crisis.
They have recent trauma from living on the streets, physical assaults, sexual assaults, emotional, and then there's also trauma that people have experienced for years and years and years. Things that maybe people don't even categorize as trauma, or things that it happened so long ago that there's not the thinking that it impacts them anymore. But for many of our folks, when you start digging in and you start hearing people's stories, it is years and years of hurt and relational brokenness that comes up.
My stepdad and my birth mother were both addicts. Their way of being able to get high over the weekends, I remember of being 6, 7 years old, they would lock me in the attic for the weekend. They'd give me a loaf of bread and a gallon of water. At the age of 15, I lived on my own, completely on the street, to get away from the abusive parents that I had. Found myself working with gangs or selling drugs, using drugs. It helped me to escape the reality of my own life. That was the only way I knew how to survive, or I thought I knew how to survive.
When our guests come in with abuse or neglect, drug and alcohol use, or toxic relationships, letting go of that hypervigilance takes time. That's a lot of what we're doing with our guests, is we're attempting to seek the gift of time if they would stay. If they would be willing to stay, then we can work with time to create a loving, safe environment for those traumas to be better understood, and then providing them good education and counseling and assistance, both within the mission and outside of the mission, to address those issues.
The Ascent Program is an evidence-based, long-term residential recovery program where we combine biblical teachings with evidence-based practices to create a holistic approach to mental health and substance use recovery. We have a staff of 2 chaplains and 5 case managers that just walk alongside these guys as they're learning how to do this. The tools, we use the 12 steps, and we use the Genesis process. There's 10 processes that deal with all these underlying issues that really are the root causes of substance use disorders. A lot of times when people are going through this process, they always come in just so closed off because they've been all about self-preservation. Slowly but surely, they start to break down and shed all of those unhealthy and unhelpful defense mechanisms that they have, and they open up and they start to actually want to look within, like what is going on over here, because that's where I can make a difference.
In the program, I let my walls down completely. I still had, reservations. We'd keep going down to more internal wounds and like deeper stuff and more scary stuff. But I was willing to try a new way of life, do it God's way, not my own. My life's a blessing now today because I'm not living in my will. I get to, and I get to give back what's given to me.
The Agape Home is our women's recovery program. Around 50 to 60 women and children stay on any given night. Agape Home is a pretty special place. Those women are so brave. The fact that they are choosing hope, that they are choosing recovery, is just courageous, especially after the amount of trauma that for many of them they've experienced for years and years, heading up to their time at Agape. For women on the streets, oftentimes it's kind of a given that in order to survive or to be safe, that you need to find oftentimes a man or someone that's going to stand up for you. And so when I've done outreach work, there's oftentimes women that have talked about, oh yeah, I definitely offered myself to men in order to be safe, in order to have housing, in order to stay in their tent, in order to be somewhat safe for that night. We know the vulnerability that people that are specifically women have out on the streets. While at Agape and our men's program, we offer things like intensive case management with caseworkers, where people are working on goal plans and addressing the holistic self. Anything from like finding an AA meeting to go to finding a church, or getting connected with somebody to help them with financial literacy, a Wacom Dream, and budgeting. And then that bleeds into our classes that we offer. So we offer about 8 classes a week, and they range anywhere from boundaries and forgiveness and Christianity 101 to conflict resolution to life skills and time management. And so this whole range of classes that people have to choose from kind of aids in that healing process.
I actually stayed at Agape in 2010. I was both fleeing domestic violence and suffering from substance use disorder. I was able to, for the first time in a really long time, have a safe and secure place that I could stay while I started to reach out and figure out what were next steps for me. When I first started working for the mission, people would say to me, "You just don't understand what it's like to be homeless." And I get to say, actually, I do. And then that just cracks open a conversation with people. We're all at a different place in our journey. I feel like the importance of just being able to meet someone where they're at and see how that we can support them in that.
Because homelessness is not a one-size-fits-all, there is not really a ideal timeline for somebody's healing journey. Some people like to think, after 30 days in a program, after 90 days in a program, somebody's good to go and should be ready to head out and get a job. And at the end of the day, trauma is going to continue to impact us well beyond that 30 or 90 days. We can't just flip that switch. And so when I think about a timeline for somebody to engage in recovery, it is so individualized, and our approach has to be that way. And I really appreciate the fact at the mission that there's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a blanket time frame for people to work through things well here.
For our guests, the hope with their trauma being addressed is that they will continue to build support, that they will continue to invite God and others into that place where they have hidden away their trauma. The goal is ultimately for them to know you're not alone in this, but there are also individuals from your Heavenly Father down through people to walk you and give you the relational support necessary to succeed.